Okay, I'm gonna start. Can everyone hear me? I'm hoping I get things first. um, so I want to let you guys know first, I do have two dogs, so if you hear anything barking, it's because they're trying to protect the people from my house. So one did just bark. Thank God I was on mute, so just beware of that. Also, I figure what we're going to do, as you guys know, we have a panel of experts that are going to talk about how we can win at the offer game. And I'm sure we've all been through highly competitive deals where we're facing like 20 offers and you're like, what can I do to make my buyer's offer, be above everybody else's and be very unique and, kind of set them apart from everybody. So we have a panel of experts that are going to go through that today. And we are going to hopefully give you a lot of good information where you can walk away thinking, oh, awesome, I'm going to try this next time. We do have some buyer agents that are going to be on the panel. And then we also have Jackie, who is a teammate of mine on Lifetime Realty Group, where she's going to kind of explain things from a different perspective since she's only she's a listing agent specialist. So she will kind of describe it on like from the perspective of what she looks for her seller and like some of the feedback she's received from her sellers. So I think that's a really awesome perspective that we can offer to you guys today. So in an effort to not hijack the entire meeting, what I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to go over some very basic points of things that you can do. And then I'm going to have the panel kind of go into a little bit more detail, like more details of what they do that is unique and stands out for them. If there's anything else that I have on my list that wasn't brought up, then I'll bring that up at the end. I have about, I think, 10 things that I do, or I suggest to my buyers when we are competing. I do have a template that I send out to them that explains all these things that they could possibly do. So if any of them weren't mentioned, then I'll bring it up at the end. But some of the basic things that we pretty much know to do in the very beginning is, when we are facing competition, the first thing we automatically think about is price. But we also have to realize that when we are dealing with, an offer, the majority of it may be about price, but we cannot forget about the terms. And that's where I usually tell my buyers, look, if you are looking for a home, you set the mindset that they are going to have to look at probably closer now to $20,000 over list price. So you want to set that mindset in the very beginning when you're doing the buyer consult. Then after that, you start talking about all the different terms you can do. And some of the ones that are pretty basic that, most are doing already would be, we talk about price, but then we also talk about writing a letter, of course, from the buyer's perspective. But I've also decided to take it a little step further and say, hey, let's write a letter from a pet's perspective. I've had my buyers put paw prints as they're signing the letters. And I've also had buyers that have kids, have the kids write a letter and have them sign their name. So that can make you stand out a little bit, but, it's pretty common for people to write a letter, but we just, you just go above the buyer's perspective. Then another thing that most will automatically do is, we try to talk about the closing date and give the seller what they want for a closing date. And then we keep the offer extremely simple because we have to think about, the seller's looking at probably 5 offers, 6, 7 offers. We want to make sure the offer is very simple and very easy to understand. And then another thing that you guys should be doing right away is start forming that relationship with the listing agent. The minute your buyer wants to submit an offer, call that listing agent, start forming that relationship with them so they know to expect an offer to come in. Also kind of probe them a little bit for information like, why are they selling? If they want to give up that information, most don't, but why are they selling? What's the desired closing date? And then, anything that I can do that may make us stand out, any suggestions. Some listing agents will say, maybe try this, do that. Some will just like, nope, you're good. But just as long as you reach out and initially talk to that listing agent before submitting that offer, that's a huge thing. So again, those are some of the basic ones that we kind of know about, but I'm going to let the panel take over and kind of talk about some things that they might have done on their own in some unique situations, and then we'll bring it back around. So parents, I've been looking at you first because you're like right there in my screen. So I'm going to have the panel go. They can introduce themselves. They can explain how long they've been in the industry and then go from there. So I'm handing it off to you.
Got to unmute there. Hi, can you guys all hear me? Okay. Yeah, so I have been, July marked 4 years at the house to home team, kind of new to color. Color came over in October. And yeah, this is a crazy market. I think you said a lot of really good kind of a outline there of like the definite like must, you know, form that relationship right away, call the agent, get as much intel as you can to be able to use that in your letter. A thing that I noticed, there was 2 things I've noticed that I did a lot this spring summer market. One was with inspection contingencies. You know, most people don't want to waive an inspection contingency, and I would never ever suggest that. But to offer, you know, when you get the results of the inspection contingency, for the buyer to remedy up to X amount of dollars post close. You know, I leave that up to the buyer. I've had examples of $5,000, but even $1,000 shows, you know, that they're not going to be, and I just reiterate it, you know, my buyer isn't going to be nitpicky, but they want the inspection and will cross any bridge when it comes to bigger issues. That's been really helpful. I've even had some people on my team, I think Abby recently wrote an offer saying curing $1,000 up to each, you know, if it's something with electrical, something with plumbing, foundation, etc. That's worked well for us, the members of our team. I don't know, I don't want to steal other people's ideas too, so maybe I just say that one. I don't want to go on too long here, but
no, and I do something similar to that you do with the inspection, but what I sometimes do is I will say excluding radon mitigation system, since that tends to be very important to some of my buyers, especially ones with kids, and it's a safety issue. But that's definitely something that is on my list as well, and has worked out very well because it's very, so many buyers are hesitant to waive that inspection, even though so many buyers are. And I always tell my buyers, I'm like, this is a way around it. Or I've also done it where this is for informational purposes only. So of course they can do the inspection, have their honey-do list. And then if it's way too many defects or issues, then they can go ahead and use it to get out of the deal. So they still have that right. And that has worked a few times too.
right. Yeah.
Okay.
Jen, I have a question for you. So when you just said, though, for informational purposes only, how are they using that then to get out of the inspection, out of it because of the inspection?
Well, we have put sometimes where the seller doesn't have the right to cure, and believe it or not, a lot of listing agents don't catch that, which blows my mind.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that gets a little sticky, even if you say shall not have the right to cure, but if you specifically state it's for informational purposes only, I would think that would negate that being able to declare that a defect.
I haven't had any issues with it. I can totally see your point on it,
Yeah.
but I haven't had any issues with it. I tend to stick more towards we're willing to give up a certain, we're willing to absorb up to a certain dollar amount before. Yeah, but that, I'm just saying that is another one that has been used. Mark on my team uses that one a lot, so maybe he can, if he was, he could probably express a little bit more, or talk a little bit more on it, but.
Right, and the way, I think the one that Paris was talking about with Abby was actually on my property that she wrote. She did get the house, there was about 6 offers, and, or maybe even more, but she just wrote, buyer will not ask for repairs that are less than $1,000 per line item of the home inspection. So she was very specific to say it's not cumulative, it's per line item, just so that we knew that it wouldn't be a nitpick. The one thing though that did give me a little bit of pause on the offer was the fact that she wanted radon for informational purposes only. And at first I was like, okay, no big deal. But then after I thought about it, I'm like, yeah, but now if they come back and with the inspection realize there's other things, but they also have radon they've got to deal with, that might make the buyer, I'm always looking at things, and things I'll share here are more things from the listing agent's perspective, since I am more a lister than working with buyers, is just looking at that saying, yeah, but that might be something then that Now they know that, and it kind of starts to all add up for them, and they want to get out of the deal. It didn't happen in this case, but it's just something to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll always, talk to my buyers about radon, and again, I'll say, sometimes in this market, people will choose to waive radon. It is completely your right to have radon. It's always suggested, especially because it's a safety thing, and explain a bit about what it is. But then, I also say some people will choose, you buy the $20 Home Depot kit after close. It costs, $800 to $1,200 to mitigate it if they're okay dealing with that, after close. Just to have one less contingency to make it stronger.
Jackie, do you have, because similar to Sarah, you work with sellers mostly. Do you have any thoughts on it when you see something come through in an offer regarding the inspection?
Well, we had a recent situation where we had 3 offers on a property. 2 of them did not have a home inspection, and 1 did. And the seller chose the offer with the inspection. There were different things in the other offers, and they also didn't choose the highest price. So things that I think are considerations, it's when sellers are looking at multiple offers, we want to look at the easiest offer to choose, the cleanest offer. The more questions we have about an offer, the less time we spend on it. And it could be a great offer. So having that initial conversation with an agent is important. It's not always easy, because if they're receiving a lot of offers in a day, it could just be a text instead of a phone call. You might not get a phone call back if they're that busy. I've not had a situation of like 20 offers or more, but other people have. That's kind of crazy. In this situation, what the sellers did is they did want more money, but they had a connection. They somehow knew people who knew these buyers, and they knew that they rescued dogs. And there was a connection. And the rest of their offer was clean. And there was no reason they thought, why not to have somebody do a home inspection? And then when we talked about, the average amount that a seller might give back for home inspection or remedy was, maybe $1,500 to $2,000. So verbally, we countered that offer up $2,000, and they accepted, and that was how they decided. And they did all that before, while we were at the table. So there are a lot of you can't always find out what's motivating that seller. And I totally get that people can't and won't, and I would never suggest anybody in my family, friends, or circle not to write with a home inspection contingency, except if they are pretty knowledgeable about all of that stuff. It's just a risk. And so I do know, though, that a lot of people are writing without them, and it does make the difference. So I don't know if there's no clear one answer, I think, but the things that we look for is how to just accept one offer. And one of the other higher offers, the guy came back to me the next day, and he said, I'm just really surprised. We were expecting a multiple counter. And I can tell you that we rarely.
Right.
So.
Yeah, I always suggest to my buyers that, we do not know 100% if we would be given an opportunity to counter anything on our offer. So if we are competing, the best thing to do is to always come with your highest and best and not to have any regrets. I do have a email template I send out to my buyers. Like I mentioned, I have all these ideas to be competitive, but I also include the very beginning, I run pricing scenarios for them, and I have 5 different pricing scenarios they could do. And I also attach like what the down payment would be, because a lot of buyers do, like a 5% down payment. So they are worried about if they go up higher, what's their new down payment going to be? So, and then I just analyze the price and pull comps, even if we are competing, because that will allow them to figure out what their comfort level is for how far high they're going to go. And it also kind of shows them that, hey, it comes down to interest rates and taxes, not so much if you're going to go up an additional $5,000. We got to really watch what the taxes are going to be and what your interest rate's going to be if you want to see a significant monthly payment difference. And that's when I always tell them, we got to be highest and best, because we're not guaranteed we'll be given another chance to go at it. So
The other
Yeah.
question I have for all of you buyer agents is, when you're writing your offers and you're putting in the financing contingency, are you writing at the loan amount that the buyer is capable of, or at what they're putting down? So for instance, are you writing, they could do 10%, but are you writing it at what they're capable of, or what they're going to do? So for instance, maybe they don't have to do 10%, they could do 3.5%. But if you write that, that doesn't look as strong as if you write what they can do, which is going to look better to the seller if they're competing. So I just wonder about that, because when I get an offer and we look at that, loan amount to the sale price, that's all I can go on. I don't know if they have more money capability.
Yeah, that's a good point. And a lot of times the offers, they're neck and neck, and it unfortunately can come down to that. This person has 20% down versus this person having 5%. All things being equal, I'm going to go with the 20% likely, depending on the strength of the pre-approval and what the lender said as well. But it just is, the seller has to find some way to make a decision. And sometimes it can come down to something like that. I wanted to add a couple things just from the listing perspective, not really what the seller looks at or not, but realize that the listing agent wields an awful lot of power. And hold on here. I've got someone else chime in. My computer just said it's running low. I got to get my charger before I lose everybody.
Abby, you can go.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of speak on that financing piece. So I am asking my clients, like, if it comes down to 2 offers that are almost identical and it is financing, like, if you have the option to put down 10% versus the 5%, we should be doing that, and your pre-approval should reflect that. I'm also asking my clients to have their pre-approvals ideally, like if we're going into a weekend of showings, like, have it updated on Friday so that it is showing that you are good to go. This isn't from June. This isn't from whenever. It is, your numbers are correct as of Friday. Because I do think it comes down to those little details that make a difference at the end of the day.
I do sometimes though run into problems when I have buyers who need to sell their current home and then find a new home, because a lot of times when they say that you ask them about their down payment, they'll say, well, we want to put at least a minimum of this down, but it depends on how much we sell our current home for. So I do sometimes run into those issues, because I have buyers that need that house contingency, and there are times where we'll find the current house first before we list or sell or we'll find the new house first before they list and sell their current home. But then I just explained to the listing agent that, this is what we're aiming for, and we're hoping to put more down, because at that time we just really don't know what will what we'll sell their current house for.
Right. So going back just to what I was saying, listing agent wise. So not only does a seller a lot of times pick the offer, and I'm Sarah Dreyer, by the way, from the, sorry, my hair, I've been outside. Sarah Dreyer from the Germantown office. I've been selling for 26 years. And not only does the seller, a lot of times if offers are neck and neck, pick the offer that they think the buyer is going to be the easiest and nicest to work with, but the listing agent, I feel that same way many times, because if I got someone that's constantly pummeling me with tons of questions, boo, 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 and this, and they're not real, or they're not communicative when I get back to them and ask them a question about their offer, they're not getting with me, I can't reach them. I'm just going, oh my gosh, how is this transaction going to be if we accept their offer? So right from the get-go, try your darndest. I know all of you probably are anyway, but to come across as competent, nice, and available. Because a lot of times I will be sitting at the table and I need to get with someone. If I can't get a hold of them, we might pass their offer because I can't get the question answered. The other thing is, and this is a bit of a pet peeve for me, but maybe for others, especially in this market where I'm getting sometimes 10 offers on a property, make sure you send your offer as one attachment. Don't send it straight from zip forms as 5, 6 different attachments, because that's so much more work for me as the listing agent. And when I've got 10 offers that are all doing that, and I'm trying to put them together, get them to the seller, combine them myself, again, it comes down to what agent do I think is going to be the easiest to work with? And when I get it all as one attachment, I'm like, woohoo, great. This agent's thinking ahead and they know what they're looking at. Also be sure that your phone number is on your signature for your email, because sometimes I will get an offer and I'm like, I don't even know how to get a hold of them. So that makes it easy again.
Sarah, real quick, just to go back to your listing attachment, because that's such your offer attachment, that's such a huge thing to have it in one attachment. Right. I totally agree with you. So just a thing, and I'm curious as to what your thought would be on this, being a listing agent, receiving this from a buyer agent. Something else that I do is I introduce the offer to the listing agent. So I attach the entire offer with, of course, the pre-approval is the very first page, or the letter, then pre-approval. But in the body of the email, I will say, here's the type of loan it is, here's the offer amount, this is the earnest money, this is who the lender is, this is what they are not, like this is what they're waiving, this is what they're doing for inspection, and then I just asked to confirm receipt, and that's about it. And then Jackie brought up a good point too. She once had an offer where there was also a little mini summary of the buyer's situation, that was included in the body of the email. So we as a team decided that that's probably a good strategy to use, because we make it so much easier for the listing agent to get to the main, like the meat of the offer within the body of the email, and then you look at the offer and print it out when you need to. But the immediate glances, you can see it right away.
Yeah, I think that's very helpful. And it's very helpful if there's anything you've written in additional provisions, make sure you call that out in your email, because listing agents, like anybody else, are human too. And if they're looking at 10 offers, I'm sorry, but something might get missed when they're scanning through. And of course, everybody wants their offer accepted tonight and they're scrambling. It's like, if there's something in that provisions about, hey, we're not going to do this, or we're real flexible on closing date, or we could do this, call it out to the agent and make sure that they are aware of that. The other thing is again, right off the bat, make sure you have your credentials for Central Lock. I bring a new listing on the market and it's really hot, and we've got tons of people calling with questions and texting and this and that. For me to then have a thing that says, I'm showing your listing here, can I have a code? And first of all, I'm like, who are you? They don't tell me who they are. Then I have to go back to showing them to confirm they really are who they say, and they really do have an appointment, because I'm not just going to shoot it out to anybody. And then once I do that, then I've got to go do it. And by the time I've done all that, and I've had all these other texts coming in about the property, I tell you, it's one more thing to make me feel like, how on the ball are you if you're from our market and you don't have your credentials yet? It's the little things, guys. It's the little things. So that's pretty much what I had so far. Most people buy, the biggest thing I can just say, and two, is most agents and most sellers ultimately will take a lower offer if they feel the buyer is a more reasonable buyer.
That's good to know.
Yeah,
I do agree with
any
you with
questions
the,
on any of that? Yeah.
it goes back to your original point too, that I always tell my buyers, again, be very simple and very easy to work with, because we want that good relationship between the seller and the buyer and the listing agent and the buyer agent. Because there's going to be a time where if we hit a snag in the process, we want everyone to be able to agree to it versus fighting with each other and then having the deal fall apart. So it's very important to put your best foot forward in the very beginning, so we all can have a smooth transaction. If the agent doesn't even know how to use Century Lockbox, you got to be more organized than that nowadays. And I would be hesitant to work with an agent who, after how many years now, doesn't even use it still. And that's where we're heading, is towards that type of technology. So I agree with you on that.
The other thing to keep in mind too, and this is just for general professionalism practice, but when you text somebody, unless you really know them really well and you absolutely know your info's in their phone, always put like the property address you're talking about. Because I'll get a text that says, hey, I have a question on your new listing. When does it start showing? And they don't even sign it. They don't put their name at the end of the text. I'm like, which one is this? I don't, and then I want to be able to get back to them. I want to get them the information. I want to sell my seller's house, but it can just be so frustrating. So always put your name, even if you've texted them once before. They may not save you in there, and then 10 texts later with other agents, they don't even remember which one you were.
Yeah. Again, we want to make it, as a buyer agent, we want to make it very easy and simple, for all parties involved. All right, Lisa, do you want to share some tidbits? Lisa Packard.
Sure. So I have been in the business 7 years, and I handle both buyers and sellers, which I see as a benefit, and to see things from both sides. And I think what we're doing right now is really helpful for those who just work on one side to see the other side. When we are working with a buyer, we do these days virtual buyer consult, and we have in our packet 2 pages of strategies for winning an offer in competition. And we just edit it, when as a listing agent, when I see something that I like, I go in and add it. So a couple things that I've seen in multiple offer situations that went over really well with my sellers that I added to my list was, let's see. So I had 11 offers on a house as a listing agent, and the offer that caught the seller's eye and was the winner wasn't the highest offer. There was an offer where the buyers were willing to pay, or agreed to pay, $2,000 of the seller's closing costs at closing. So the reason that the sellers liked that was we weren't sure that some of the higher offers were even going to appraise out. So this was very attractive to the seller because it was a way of putting more money in their pocket without having appraisal anxiety. So, whatever your buyer's capable of, that they are comfortable with, doing a seller closing cost credit, very, very impressive. They don't see it coming. They were impressed. Another one that I saw, I think this came from Amanda, North Shore Keller Williams. They put into their offer on a listing of mine that was in competition that the buyer would pay the seller's portion of the real estate taxes. So depending on what time of year it is, if your buyer is capable, and these have extra cash on hand type strategies, but if your buyer is capable and it's like March or April and they're willing to pay 3 months worth of real estate taxes instead of getting that credit at closing, that's another way of putting more money in the seller's pocket without inflating the price. And I've had a couple of situations recently. I had a 13 offer battle recently on a Milwaukee house. I had a 7 offer battle on a West Dallas house. a 5 offer battle on a Whitefish Bay house. And in those cases, usually it was not the highest offer that won. It was the cleanest offer. And it was, offers without radon testing, without testing contingency. Maybe they didn't have appraisal contingency. They were clean offers that we, if they had an appraisal, they were an offer that we felt would appraise. Sometimes just putting an obscenely high price on your offer isn't going to work out, because the seller, we put a price on the house for a reason, not because, if we thought it was a 150 house, not a 180 house. So just some things to think about. Oh, one more thing. On my Whitefish Bay listing I had last week, we had 5 offers, and 2 of them did something that the seller really didn't like. So beware. In the offer to purchase, some people will strike out language. Let me tell you which lines. Okay, some people strike out lines 211 to 212 in the inspection contingency. How that reads: for the purposes of this contingency, defects do not include structural, mechanical, or other conditions, the nature and extent of which buyer had actual knowledge or written notice before signing this offer. So it basically means, buyer can't get out buyer can walk away based on things that were on the record. So my seller saw that and they're like, well, wait a minute, I filled out my real estate condition report, and I don't like that they crossed that out. It makes me feel like they'll walk away, on anything. And so they didn't pick those offers. They picked a different offer that didn't have that crossed out. And that's what I got.
I don't think I've ever seen that before or come across that. So that's interesting that they thought to do that.
I did it personally myself recently, because there was moisture coming into some windows. We were not in competition, and I explained myself to the listing agent and said, hey, buyers just want to make sure that they can find out what's going on with the moisture coming in the windows. And that's why I crossed out this language. And because we weren't in competition, it worked out and we got it. But I might have made a different choice in drafting that if we were in competition.
Yeah, again, it comes back to who seems like the most reasonable buyer, and to a seller saying, well, that doesn't seem very reasonable, if they want to maybe bring up something I already told them about.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you mentioned,
go ahead. One thing regarding that appraisal contingency. Jen, do you have it so I can just share my screen quick? Can you go down to share screen and allow others to share screen?
oops, hang on. Okay. Is it the multiple
Yeah,
participants?
that worked. No, that worked. Yeah, so one thing I just want to point, so when people sometimes they'll say, my buyer will make up this much difference in an appraisal, et cetera. The easier way, I think, to do it is if you look down here where at line 312, 313, indicating an appraised value of the property equal to or greater than, cross off the agreed purchase price and just put what's the minimum that it needs to appraise at. It's easier than adding all this verbiage. So if, let's say, the property is, they wrote 350, but they say it only really needs to appraise at 340, just say that to be greater than 340. But like we said, make sure you call that out to the agent, because they will miss that you changed it right there. Or in something, say, see lines, change to line 313, or highlight it in yellow before you send it over, something, because otherwise they do miss it.
So Sarah, what's funny about that is you recently met, I think you were recently talking to Scott and Jeremy about that, because what we were doing, whenever my buyer would want to waive the appraisal, we were trying to come up with language where we would state that at least has to appraise at list price. If it does not appraise at list price, then the seller has to make up that difference.
Right.
And the buyer is only responsible for any amount over list price. And then we started now doing this because you mentioned it to them,
Right.
and it is a much cleaner way to get your point across.
Yeah, just less verbiage. But again, call it out for sure to the agent.
Yep, absolutely. So Lisa, I do have a question. You mentioned that during your virtual buyer consult, you kind of go over some of the strategies. So during my buyer consults, I'm hesitant to do that because I'm afraid the buyers are going to forget, because it's so much is getting thrown at them at once, and every situation is unique. So what are your, like, how's the reaction, or what reaction are you getting from buyers when you go over all of that?
It's been positive. It has helped me win some buyers if I've been interviewed among a couple of buyers agents. Also, it sets the stage for what they should be prepared for. So, I'm letting them know this is the way the market is. Expect that your offer is going to be in competition. And by the way, since we're going to be in competition, here are all the different things we can do to set your offer apart. And then we talk about them again when we're going to write the offer. But, it plants the seed in their brain that it's going to be, a fight. And here are all your different tools and your weapons. And it's just, I think it's important that they know going in, I need to mentally tack on X amount of dollars on top of the purchase prices of these houses. And, I need to decide, am I going to be willing to waive a radon test or waive a regular testing contingency, or, all the different things. What kind of love letter should I write? All those things.
Yeah. One thing I will also share, when you are setting or getting their mind right, kind of, that buyer consult, I'm a huge believer in those as well. So I try to set the tone immediately. I do always have to have a reality check with my buyers. If they say they're pre-approved up to 250, their search is going to like 220. I'm not going to have them go to their highest point, because I need to make sure that they do have cash on hand and they're able to negotiate. You don't want to waste anybody's time. You don't want to see a home that is 250 and we're up against 10 offers and my buyers can't even go 251. Because that's going to be heartbreaking for them. They're not going to understand it. They're going to blame you. And then if they are so much emotionally attached to that home, that is the house they're going to like compare every single house to going forward. So I do explain to my buyers in the beginning, look, there's going to be strong competition. So I recommend we leave this amount of wiggle room. And then I always say, if you do your own searches and you do find something that's at the top end of your budget, let's wait a couple of days to see if there is any competition, because if there is, it will be gone within a matter of 24, 36 hours. And a lot of times they're very good with that. And if they do want to see something, I remind them of that, and they tend to be good with it. So I agree, like setting the expectations and stuff up front will save a lot in the end. All right, so Abby, what are your thoughts on things?
Am I unmuted?
You're unmuted.
Okay. So, overall, kind of, I try to combine all of these things that we've talked about. I do try to, as you said, prepare my buyers for the market and what that looks like, and really focus in on houses that make sense for them. I do always remind everyone too, though, that yes, it's a transaction and it is a business deal to some degree, but for many people, it is a highly emotional experience, whether it's the sellers or the buyers. And I do try to some degree, tap into that through the process. I think this weekend, I got 2 offers that were accepted that were lower than other offers on the table, but we looked at all the terms, and helping clients understand that it is not necessarily about your offer price, but it's the complete package, I think is super important. But again, humanizing my clients to the listing agent and to the potential sellers as well is really something I try to do, because again, it is a business transaction. However, it is also, people's lives, and it's a huge purchase, and people have memories and emotions attached to homes. And I think, keeping that in mind is something that I try to do with each transaction if it makes sense. You know, on a flip, they don't really care about your golden retriever, you know, like they actually, I've seen clients be offended that somebody sent a letter on a flip. So I just try to make sure it makes sense for each property and tap into that, I guess. But yeah, I as everybody else said, I really try to look at all the terms, keep it as clean as possible. And, you know, I address each contingency as we go and try to make it as appealing to the sellers as we can. I don't know if that is helpful, but yeah.
No, I think a lot of people, you know, Alex can actually attest to this because we just closed a deal this morning. A lot of people forget the impact of the letter and humanizing the buyers to the sellers. I agree. I never ever suggest a letter on a flip because it's just business. Same with investment properties or rentals, it's just business. Right. But I encourage my buyers, you know, if it's a home they absolutely love, try to pull from some stuff they saw in the house when they were walking through it. If there's any type of connection that you have with something that you saw in that house, bring it up in the letter. Also, again, that's why I said, you know, bring in the children, bring in the family pets. The only thing, you know, and it depends on how you view this or not. I've had mixed emotions about people including pictures and not including pictures. So it's kind of up in the air about that. I've heard stories of listing agents not happy that pictures were included because they feel like, you know, it sways the deal one way or another. So that I'm kind of iffy about. But yeah, I do believe in the human emotion.
Yeah, I think it's a thing that sometimes people forget about. And really, like, when you're working with a seller that's owned a house for, you know, 40 years, they want to know that the person that's moving in is going to appreciate it in the same way that they did. And, you know, I think more often than not versus really just it being about numbers. So yeah.
Yep.
So one thing to add regarding letters is, and it was in the, I don't know if it was the NAR magazine or the Wisconsin Realtors magazine, but had a thing about letters. I don't know if it's in Legal Hotline or just best practices over the last couple months. And a couple things that they talked about was some agents will go ahead and attach the letter to the offer, because I think they do that because they want to be sure the seller, you know, hopefully the seller sees that and knows there's a letter because they're thinking the agent might not show them the letter. But realize that once you attach the letter to the offer, some things that are in the letter could potentially be a part of the offer then. Like if they've made a comment like, you know, and we can be really flexible on the closing date if anything changes on your end, and then all of a sudden something changes in the transaction, the seller needs flexibility on closing and the buyer won't give it to them. They can say, listen, but in your letter that was attached to this offer said you would be. So you need to be a little cognizant of that. And then going with pictures, it's just a toss up because you have to, you know, be sure that there's not going to be a fair housing issue.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a really good point because I am one that attaches the letter to the offer. So that's definitely, and I think I do it really just because I like to do one attachment, and it's just easier to just put it all in one attachment and send it off. But that's good to know.
One attachment is fine, but just don't like physically attach it to the offer in the attached addendum S, addendum.
Oh, that I never know. Yeah.
No, some agents do attach it that way because they want to be sure that the seller knows there was a letter as well.
Oh, yeah. Okay, I see. So you're talking like on the last page of the addendum A where it says these are part of the offers.
Yep.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, can I mention on that, if a buyer agent does not attach it, you know, referencing it as included, the listing agent does not have to give it to the seller. So I think there's, you know, there could be an argument made for one way or the other.
Sure, absolutely.
There was
just need to be careful what's in it is my point.
Right, exactly. So for me, I have been writing it as, you know, part of the offer, to be sure that it gets in the hands of the seller. On the flip side, we had a listing recently where we did not think the seller would want to see any letters, just because of, you know, how the listing was. So we received a letter It was beautiful. We did not give it to the seller.
Yeah.
So I think it's a couple of points to consider with those.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. We have maybe about 10 minutes left, so I'm just going to say some things that weren't mentioned that we also do as a team. So the biggest thing too that I'm surprised no one mentioned yet was the earnest money. So we all know that earnest money is roughly 1% of the accepted offer amount. I do always tell my buyers, if we are competing, if we could put more than just the minimum down, that goes a long way, because it shows the sellers that we are very serious about the house. We're not going to get cold feet and walk away, that we're willing to work with them. And then of course, the more cash on hand, the more secure they look in their financing. So that's another thing that we will change. We also shortened up the deadlines. So instead of doing the typical 15-day inspection, we'll do 7 to 10. It's kind of hard though. For loan commitment and appraisal, you really need to talk to that lender first, or just know, because lately the appraisals have been a little bit longer. So it makes no sense to shorten up an appraisal when all of a sudden 3 weeks in you have to extend it because they're all backed up. So have that relationship with your lender and know exactly like what they can do within a certain amount of time. So when you're putting in the offer, you don't have to make a change.
Can I piggyback off of that, Jen?
Yeah.
If I am writing a tighter timeline for appraisal financing, I am often asking the lender to please call the listing agent and let them know that this is something that they can do in that window. And while you're at it, can you back up this buyer? So just to, again, if you're tightening that up, having that phone call, I think makes a difference.
Well, and I think you have to make sure to counsel your buyer that they're going to have to get that appraisal ordered ASAP. They can't wait till the inspection's done.
Well, so Abby, to your point, that was going to be another thing that we suggest some of our lenders to do, is to call or write something to the listing agent on the buyer's behalf, so they know they are financially strong. And Sarah, to your point, that's actually a pet peeve of mine that lenders do. Like, I don't like the fact that they implanted in the buyer's head that we're going to wait, because what the buyers and the lenders, they put that in their head, not even realizing that, hey, we got 30 days to close, we can't wait. And then to try to undo that with the buyer when the lender already planted it in their head, knowing we have 30 days, it is incredibly frustrating.
Right.
So that's another reason for you buyer agents to really sync up with lenders that you work well with, that you know, and really try to have buyers work with the lenders that you know. There's been so many times that listing agents have asked me, have you worked with this lender before? I've never heard of them. And if you can't really vet them, the listing agent is going to be hesitant then to move forward with your offer, because again, like Sarah and Jackie mentioned, they're looking at a simple offer that's going to get them to close. If the buyer agent is unsure of the lender, what kind of confidence are we giving the listing agents? So when you first meet up with your buyer and when you first do that buyer consult, talk about that pre-approval. And stress to your buyer that means a lot when you're submitting an offer, especially during competition. No one's going to work with Quicken Loans. That's ridiculous. And if it's down to a local bank versus US Bank, the local bank's going to win. So you have to have those conversations with your buyers. And Sarah mentioned, she has all the power when she's a listing agent and when she's an agent in general. I always, whenever I do my training, I keep telling all the buyer agents or all the agents, you have so much power. You just have to be able to communicate it to your client. And that's where that trust and that relationship building starts. And it starts with the buyer consult. And you just go through setting the tone, getting the right lender in place, doing this and doing that. And then they're going to listen to everything you say. So it's up to you to guide them in the right direction, because you have so much power.
And on the tone of pre-approvals, I know sometimes agents or buyers, more so buyers, they want their pre-approval to be like for their offer. Like they're writing 400, they don't want their pre-approval that says they're approved to 500 to be submitted. And I'm the opposite. I'm like, show them your buying power, because if we've got 5 offers and somebody says they're approved 200,000 above what they wrote, I'm saying this is probably a slam dunk buyer, as opposed to the one whose pre-approval is just for, 5,000 over what they offered.
Yep. And I know
The
Nicole
seller's
will
going to
do
come
that
back on a
too.
$400,000 house and say, oh, you're approved to 600, pay 600. They don't do that. It just shows that you're a very strong buyer.
And that falls back
Totally
into
agree.
like buyers seriously taking the advice of family and friends and Googling. And I mean, I even tell my buyers to stop. Like even in the consult, I'm like, do not listen to friends and family who purchased a home years ago and this and that. I'm the expert. I give them my credentials. And then I even tell them like, we do continuing education every other year. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's better to listen to me than someone saying, oh, I'm so hesitant to even go $5,000 to show have like $5,000 to negotiate. That's the stupidest thing I ever heard of. I will give them the pre-approval, and I'm like Sarah, just show them what you're pre-approved for. It does not guarantee that the buyer is going to go that high. And when you have a very smart listing agent who's working with a smart seller, it'd be so stupid for them to pick an offer $70,000 over list price because it's not going to appraise out. You got to be realistic with some of this stuff. And to me, the dollar amount on the pre-approval means nothing. As long as it can cover what you're saying it's going to cover, if it goes way over, who cares? That's my rant on that. Abby, sorry, what were you going to say?
Oh no, I was going to say I fully agree, and that is like one of the biggest things that I try to hit home, where it's like again, show them your buying power. It has nothing to do with this specific house or anything of that nature. It just shows that you can do this, and that it's another check mark in the vote of confidence, so
Yeah. One other thing on the pre-approval and again, it goes back to if you can get your buyers to work with lenders that you like, know, and trust, and you have like how they'll write their pre-approvals. So like if I get a pre-approval that's dated the day of the offer, and it does not specifically state in there that credit has been verified, income has been verified, employment's been verified, I'm assuming this is a pre-qual based on a quick conversation with the lender. And I don't even know that they've been vetted. I mean, and as much as I can as the listing agent, I'm calling all of these lenders.
So Sarah, can I just ask kind of on that? So just what are your thoughts on me, like having my clients get that updated pre-approval each week to reflect that they're currently still pre-approved? You're saying that in your mind potentially looks like a red flag?
Well, it can, depending on what's in the rest of the pre-approval.
Okay.
So if you have something that says, everything's been verified, then fine. This is an updated pre-approval, and here's the pre-approval, as opposed to just, based on the information given, that just isn't as strong.
Yeah.
But with these days of COVID, though, it is kind of nice to know it isn't one from 4 months ago.
Yeah, because rules have changed.
Yep.
I think it's
Sorry, you're bringing up good question now. I'm like questioning things like, do I continue to have them update it, or is it okay to have 2 weeks ago or whatnot? So thank you.
a thing that happened in my recent Whitefish Bay multiple offer situation was we one of the offers was very, very attractive, but it didn't have a proof of funds. And so I don't know how we can expect a seller to just trust that someone has the funds. So I think that, preparing your buyer that they need to have their pre-approval, or if it's cash, they need to have a proof of funds ready and they need to send it with the offer. Because in that case, that buyer who didn't send their proof of funds with the offer, they missed out because they were willing to pay a little more, but the seller picked a different one because it came with the proof of funds and they felt a lot better about it.
I do agree. And one thing that, for the agents that are newer or just hesitant to have those conversations with their buyers about pre-approval, I know that for some that can be a really tough conversation. Some things that I've said to them to try to get them to get that pre-approval is that now that COVID is happening, there are some showing restrictions. Some sellers want only serious buyers, and some will ask to see that pre-approval before you see the property. So that's one way you can get around it being a sticky situation. And then another thing too that's really big is that you need to know the type of loan that they qualified for. So as a buyer agent and you're showing that home to the buyer, if they have an FHA or VA loan, you need to point out possible defects that could come up during the inspection or the appraisal. So as long as you're pointing stuff out, and, that, not as long as you're pointing stuff out, but that's another reason or another way you can get them to have that pre-approval, because you're showing them how you're trying to help them out by trying to find a home that they know everything about and they're fully prepared for what could possibly happen. If they purchase that home, like there's paint chips. Okay, I know that I may end up having to take care of them because the seller might not want to do it because my loan is requiring it. And I'm good with that. So when you have that information ahead of time and you can educate your buyer on it, that helps a huge deal. So I find that just saying those two things to buyers, they have no problems having that pre-approval. And then, of course, it's required to submit an offer. And if you have to wait even 24 hours for it, you could lose out on it. So that's another big way to drive that home. So do we have any other questions? Because we're kind of a minute away from 2 o'clock. Any questions? Anybody want to contribute anything that might have been missed or?
I have a question for the buyer agents. If on people who have to write a FHA, have you found a way to get your offers accepted?
Yeah, actually, what are your thoughts on some of that? Because we have an agent on our team that has been struggling with her buyers getting an FHA loan, an offer accepted.
The only thing I can say is if they write in there that buyer will be responsible, at buyer's expense for any FHA required work orders, if any. I add if any at the end because there might not be any and you don't want to plant the seed that there is going to be some.
Yeah, yeah.
Also see the older homes, the ancient days on market count, like 6 or greater. See those houses. We got one recently. We got one accepted because it had been on the market like 2 weeks, and at that point we weren't in competition, so we were able to get one accepted for FHA.
I was gonna say too, I had a VA loan buyer and we saw a house that was 9 days on the market, so that was forever, and we offered $5,000 over list with $2,500 closing cost credits, and that was good enough to get it. So
Zach once made a comment recently that says he just doesn't even compete. He always has his buyers look at homes that are like a week or more on the market so he can avoid competition with his buyers. Diana, do you want to say something before?
Oh yeah, on the FHA too, I did have a buyer who was FHA, and I was afraid of that too. And there was something that I spotted as I showed them the house that I knew would be flagged as an FHA, and I knew my buyers were handy. So I actually wrote the item that the buyer would address prior to the appraiser coming out so that it would not be a hindrance in their offer. We did win, and it closed just recently. So it worked out well. And at the time of the home inspection is when the buyer did the repair real quick. It was a simple thing, but I knew it'd be flagged. So it got approved. But another thing too is I saw someone ask a question on this. I recently had an offer on a listing of ours, and the buyer wrote in that they would pay for the seller's title fee up to $1,000. And yes, that does come out of pocket from the buyer. The buyer actually has to bring that money to closing. It's not part of the offer. So as far as like rolling in the offer, so it was creative.
Yep. You do though sometimes have to watch with some of that. I offer that too, where I list like possible fees that the buyer could also pay for. Another thing too is they could pay for like the septic and well testing versus having the seller pay for it. But you just have to watch that you make sure your buyer actually has the cash on hand. So if something is too outrageous, the listing agent is going to say, can your buyer afford this? I've had that happen when we waived an appraisal that was going 20 over. They're like, can your buyer afford this? Do they have the cash on hand? And so sometimes that's when you do need the lender to come in and have those conversations with the listing agent.
And just real curious on the panel real quick, on the appraisals, has anybody had experience lately with their listing not appraising out and the buyer doesn't have the funds And so were they able to come to agreement with the seller bringing down the purchase price?
I had one, we went 10,000 over and the house seriously appraised at 16,000 under list. And that's why, Sarah, we start talking about the whole, make sure it appraises to this dollar amount. And I will tell you, it was very close to being cambered. Terry Lewis was the listing agent, and she fought very hard to get that appraisal changed. We were able to change it a little bit, and then we did miraculously come to an agreement on the new revised price. But you guys have to watch out for that, because I was completely shocked that it was so far under list, especially when we pulled comparables and it seemed to have been priced right. So other than that, most things have been appraising out.
I have a question. So are you putting in language in the offers because, you know, people are putting in offers 20, 30,000 over, that if it doesn't appraise that much, that you're going to cover, you know, part of that difference between the appraisal and the offer price?
So the language that we started putting in is that, and yeah, like what Sarah mentioned, that one line we strike it out, then we put in our, like the accepted off or what we're offering. So we know that, or we'll put like the list price, and so they know that we needed to appraise at list price. Then my buyers are willing to cover up to the accepted offer amount. So I do put that language in there because, you know, if we are going to come very high, like 20 or 25 over, we want to make sure that the seller feels safe accepting our offer and not having to worry about it not appraising out. Because we've said, you know, throughout this call that, yeah, a great amount has to do with the offer price, but it also has to do with the terms. And it also has to do with the fact that they have to be realistic about it appraising out. So if my buyers are willing to go this high over, then we'll put language in there about the appraisal, whether we will contribute up to a certain dollar amount if it doesn't appraise out, or it needs to appraise to list price. And then if, you know, my buyer will handle any amount, any difference between the appraised amount and the accepted offer amount, as long as it comes to appraises it at least list price. And that way, when I'm having the conversations too with my buyers, I can say, look, if you waive the appraisal, worst case scenario, you have to have an additional 20,000 in your pocket to bring to closing. That's worst case scenario. And it makes those conversations a little bit easier to have, and it puts things in perspective, and it also, that way they can see if they're able to afford it or not. Is that what you were looking for, Alex? Any other questions? Nope. Okay. Well, I hope you guys found this beneficial. And as always, if you have any other questions or suggestions or anything like that, feel free to reach out to all of us. Yeah, that's it for me.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jen.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.